وأنا يعني لو أتيحت لي الفرصة بنتكلم يعني لساعات، لكن بحاول نحن نضبط النقاش. وكمان هذه دعوة للحاضرين إنه لا تنتظروا للأخير من أجل طرح الأسئلة. طبعا بتيح فرصة لطرح الأسئلة، ولكن إن حال سمعتوا شيء فاتني أو شيء قاله الأستاذ أنور كان لابد ما يعقب عليه، اكتبوا في الدردشة، أنا أتابعها وبطرحها على الأستاذ. طبعا أنا كنت حابة أنتظر أكثر لأنه أشوف الانضمام، الناس ما زالت تنضم. ف لكن حرصي على الوقت يقول لي نو. نبدأ على
تمام.
أساس إنه الجميل إنه المساحة هذا أو النقاش هذا مسجل، وبالتالي أي حد بيفوته شيء بإمكانهم في وقت لاحق العودة إليه. أستاذ أنور، أهلا وسهلا بك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. في هذه الندوة التي ينظمها معهد TD بالشراكة مع منظمة سام للحقوق والحريات ورابطة أمهات المختطفين ومنتدى سفراء العدالة الانتقالية ضمن مشروع أوسع اسمه سبارك. المتحدثين اليوم هم الأستاذ والمحامي أنور البني، وهو رئيس المركز السوري للدراسات والأبحاث القانونية. الأستاذ أنور، لمن لا يعرفه، أشك أن ما فيش أحد من الحاضرين لا يعرفه، الأستاذ كان من أبرز من نشطوا في مسألة التقاضي الذي يعني حدث في أرجاء أوروبا ضد مرتكبي جرائم الحرب في سوريا أمام القضاء الألماني والفرنسي والهولندي أيضا. ومتحدث الآخر هو الأستاذ توفيق. أستاذ توفيق، أنا مش عارفة إذا أنت فاتح الكاميرا. أستاذ توفيق الحميدي، وهو محام يمني وناشط حقوقي ورئيس لمنظمة سام للحقوق والحريات. الحديث مثل ما قلت بيكون شيق، وبنحاول يعني مع أن المسألة مش سهلة بيكون صعب علينا أن احنا نبقى في إطار موضوعنا، ألا وهو في الإطار الواسع نحن نتحدث عن العدالة الانتقالية، لكن في جزئية بسيطة وصغيرة ومحددة نحن نتحدث عن المساءلة. وفي هذه الجزئية قبل أن نبدأ حابة أدي الميكروفون لك أستاذ توفيق، لو بدأنا معك وفي أول محور، وهو مسألة التعاون وتوحيد منهجيات التوثيق لدعم المساءلة. وما يجعل هذا المحور مهم أو سؤالي من أين جاء، أنه نحن الآن وإحنا نحاول نتعلم من التجربة السورية، لعب المجتمع المدني السوري دور لا يقارن في مختلف الفترات الزمنية اللي أنا سعيدة إن احنا الآن نتحدث في حقبة مختلفة تماما عن حقبة قبل سنتين أو حتى قبل 5 سنوات. وفي كل حقبة كان المجتمع المدني السوري هو الركيزة الثابتة. ومن الدروس اللي نتعلمها هي دروس كثيرة، احنا كيمنيين لابد ما نتعلمها من التجربة السورية. أهم ما فيها واللي مرتبطة ارتباط مباشر بمسألة المساءلة هو الدور الذي قاموا به في مسألة التوثيق، في مسألة المناصرة. فمن وجهة نظرك أستاذ توفيق، المجتمع اليمني وواقع التوثيق وواقع إعداد ملفات قد تعتبر أو لا تعتبر جاهزة بمحاكمة.
in different time periods. I'm extremely happy that the situation changed in Syria than 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and in every stage the Syrian civil society was crucial. There are many lessons to learn as Yemenis from the Syrian experience, and the key lesson that we can learn, which is related to accountability, was the role the civil society conducted in the documentation, the advocacy. So from your perspective, Mr. Tawfiq, the Yemeni civil society reality about documentation that we have, and can we have prosecutions now in Yemen? Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to you, Shuruq, and good afternoon to Mr. Anwar al-Bunni and all the participants. In fact, I'd like to raise an initial question that could be a very good entry point for this discussion. It's about what is the problem of accountability in Yemen. today, after 1 decade of conflict that erupted on the 21st of September 2014, we in Yemen, it's not about not having information or not having documentation. We have something. The civil society exerted great efforts to, to document and monitor human rights violations, and they have worked with different Yemeni and non-Yemeni organizations, and we have thousands and thousands of incidents of testimonies, of pictures and documents, and we have a big chunk of knowledge about the patterns of violations perpetrated in Yemen. Those committed inside detention centers, the blowing up of houses, the looting of properties, as well as information about the parties that were engaged in these violations, the torture and the shelling and other violations. But the problem is that this momentum did not become accountability. So there is weakness in the internal judicial institutions, either at the judicial level or the legislative level. And at the international level, maybe we will talk about the international level later. Mr. Anwar can shed light on that. The problem starts from within Yemen. We have violations, there is lack of justice, and there are issues also in the documentation and accountability. There are gaps in the system because during the years of conflict, the documentation activities focused on proving the incidents and giving voice to the victims and alerting the international community and exercising pressure on the parties and preserving the memory. And this is an important function because during the conflict, you want to do these things in order to reduce the intensity of violations. But this information that we have collected, can it actually become court cases or court files if there are prosecutions and investigations? So things would change. It's not enough to say that this person was tortured at Hodeidah or in Mukalla or in Aden. We have to know who was running the detention center then, and what was the chain of command, who was issuing the orders, and what evidence is available. So it's not enough to know that these weapons, for example, were delivered to this party. We need to know who provided the finance, who procured these weapons, and who facilitated the delivery of the weapons. So we have this challenge, and this challenge is facing the entire civil society in Yemen. And the other issue is that Yemeni organizations that conducted monitoring and documentation, they have suffered. They suffered from a number of issues. So, for example, they had structural issues, meaning that they did not maintain a stable monitoring documentation team for 6 or 7 or 8 years to accumulate experience and to produce files and to produce documentation that can be brought before a court. And the other thing, the security aspects played a role in this weakness. And the third, most serious thing in Yemen is the political polarization. Today, many of the issues and the violations focus on one party, or the files focused on one party and neglected others. And they lacked the methodology sometimes, they lacked providing information about the mechanism of work that was adopted. And today, we're facing the challenge of how can we sort out all these documents that we have in order to establish case files and things that can lead us to the next stage. So there are 4 points that I want to raise. Number one, we have multiple methodologies of documentation or different methods of documentation. So some organizations, for example, would consider a specific case as torture, others would consider it as enforced disappearance. So we have these different methodologies. And number two, we have the documentation for what? And number three, the focus on the direct perpetrator and not understanding the chain of
أنا أكره جدا إني
mean
أقاطع
supply.
الحبل
And
أفترض،
number
ولكن
four,
عشان نضيف الوقت
we have
أحيانا
fragmented
وأنا أعتذر
information,
عن ذلك،
and
لكن
the
عشان
different
أحاول أتجاوز هذه
NGOs, they
الإشكالية اللي
keep
أنت
the
ذكرتها
information for themselves.
بوضوح
We do
تام
not
من
share
غير المنهجية أو
information.
توحيد
We
الجهود.
can have
يعني
an
الآن ربما
information
بعض
database
الحالات
for
كذلك،
everyone,
لكن في وقت
but
سابق كنت قلت
instead
كثير
of
من
that,
الدعم
we
لدى
are working
الوظائف من
in
أجل
silos, and
تمكين
individual
المنظمات المجتمعية
organizations,
المدني،
they keep
دعم
their information for
النساء. ما
themselves.
الذي
So
منع
what we
منظمات
have
المجتمع
accumulated
المدني
in terms
أن
of information throughout the years,
يعني تعمل
we
أفق
have to
المساءلة موجود؟
restructure
هذا
it,
أولا. ثانيا،
and we
هل
have
نحن بحالة
to
زمنية
establish
عملت
evidence
اللجنة
and proof
الوطنية
in
للتحقيق في
order
في
to
حقوق
serve
الإنسان؟
in
ومع ذلك رغم
litigation
حضور
and
اللجنة
transitional
ورغم الدعم
justice.
الذي كان موجه
So we will
لها
need to
ورغم دعم
consolidate our
مكتب المحلف
methodologies.
أو مجلس حقوق
I'm very
الإنسان
sorry to
بحجم
interrupt
الجهود
you, but because of the lack of time,
عشان
I'll have
خطوات
to do
الحل
that.
والتجاوز.
In
ما كان
order to
وجهك؟ ما
address the
الذي
points
جعل منظمات
that
المجتمع
you have
المدني تدافع
clearly
عن
described, the
استغلال
lack
الدعم
of
الذي يتم
unified
ورفض الحديث ما
methodology.
بينها، مع أنكم تشتغلوا بشراكة
Yes, I
كبيرة
think
بشكل يعني
this is
علني.
problematic. In the past, I believe a lot of support was provided to CSOs to support accountability. What prevented society organizations from achieving a kind of accountability? Because they had some resources to do that. And number two, the National Commission of Inquiry is in operation, and despite the presence of the Commission and the support provided to it, and although the Human Rights Council supported the National Commission of Inquiry, but uh, the the product is still not up to the level. So what are the factors that do not allow civil society organizations to achieve more, given the support provided to them? If we talk about the support can be divided to different levels. And the support that was delivered to monitoring, documentation, and evidence building may not exceed 15% of the total support provided. So if we examine the past, we will find that most of the projects and most of the support focused on awareness raising or peace building or dialogue or things like that. With DT Institute, we worked on three projects, and these three projects were related to documentation, especially in relation to torture and looted funds. And we have not maybe fulfilled the international standards 100%, but we have documented a specific type of cases that can help us in the future. So the process of support or the support provided, large portion of it was not for monitoring and documentation and evidence building. And as well, there are some organizations that had weaknesses in their operations in the field. So they did not build their capacities, and this did not allow them to take advantage of the funding provided to them properly and to use it efficiently. If I give you the example of the Mothers of Abductees Association, this association is very specialized, and they have built a team, and they have an accumulation of achievements. So they started from scratch, and now in 10 or 7 years' time, they have the experience, they have the capacity, and they have the knowledge in the field. And the reason for
شكرا
that,
أستاذ توفيق، أحب أنك
the reason
استوعبت
behind that is
المسؤولية
that the
والإخوة
support
المناسبان لي
provided to this association
أعطي المايك
was very
للأستاذ أنور. طبعا
specific,
أستاذ
was
أنور قلنا
carefully
أن وصف
allocated,
الوسائل
and
التقنية
therefore this
المتعلقة
association
بمسألة
built its
المساعدة
capacities.
والإجراء
And
والنص،
I can say
قبل هذا
that
بكله أجمل
the other
ما
issue is that
يمكن كجهد
accountability in
بشري
Yemen
أن
is almost
يكسر
lacking.
لحظات
We do
البؤس
not have judicial
واليأس.
institutions,
كان دائما
and
المجتمع
many of
المدني
the
يحاول
war crimes
عندما كان مثل
perpetrators
صدام
are still inside
يحيل
Yemen.
الملف للجناية
In the
الدولية أو
Syrian case, for example, they
للمجتمع
left to
المدني
Europe,
بكل ما فيه من طاقة
and
أن يحط
then
مجلس
they were
حقوق
subject
الإنسانية في اللجنة
to the
بعد إنشاء
European
الآلية المحايدة
jurisdiction, the universal
وبعدين
jurisdiction,
يعني
and
عملت المنظمات والمبادرات
they were
عملية
hunted
حث
down and then
وتوثيق
prosecuted.
انتهاكات حتى
Thank you,
عندما
Mr.
كان الفضاء
Tawfiq,
الواقعي
and thank
مقيد
you
استغلوا الفضاء
for
الإلكتروني.
for discussing the Syrian experience, and this is an opportunity to move to Mr.
لا أريد أن
Anwar.
أقول أن
Mr.
الوضع
Anwar,
اليوم مثالي،
before
ولكن هناك
we discuss
نوعا
the
ما
technical
أمنية
matters of
روحية.
accountability and
هل
procedures and the
كل هذا
text,
كالأمل وكل ما
I'd
بنيته
like you to
وكل ما
tell us
حاولت
about what is
القيام به،
inspiring about the Syrian
هل يمكن
experience.
تهيئة الأرضية
In the
كالماء
desperate moments,
قدرت
the civil
تبنوا عليها؟
society in Syria never stopped
تفضل.
trying. When the Security Council decided
تحياتي
not
لك
to refer the
أخي
file
شروق
to
أستاذ
the
شروق
ICC,
تحياتي أستاذ
the
توفيق
civil
ولا
society
سيما
in Syria
الموجودين
was not
والمشاركين أنا سعيد
frustrated.
جدا
You
إنه
worked with the Human Rights
أكون
Council, and then a
معكم
neutral
يعني
mechanism was created.
نحن
So
يعرف الأستاذ
you
توفيق
did a lot
أن
regardless of the
حوالي 30
restrictions.
محامي محامية من
So today,
المناطق العربية اللي ممكن
I don't
تستفيد
want to
توصل
say that the
تستفيد من
situation is
حقوق
perfect
الشرعية
today in
العالمية
Syria, but
من
maybe
اليمن من السودان من
you
العراق
have a better
من
opportunity
تونس
now.
من مصر
And so
حاولنا قدر الإمكان
today,
إنه
I think it is possible to do something. Do you
نختلط
think
بالتجربة
you
السورية
can build on what you have
والمحامين
achieved in the past and do something in the future?
ممكن تستفيد من
Thank
التجربة
you,
والوضع
Shuruq.
الواقع
My
بحكي
greetings
أستاذ
to
توفيق
Tawfiq
ما بيخف بعيد
and
عن الوضع السوري
all
يعني حتى
participants,
يعني
and I'm
منذ
extremely
عدة
glad
منظمات
to
والتوثيق
take part in
يعني كان
this
موجود بالوضع
webinar.
السوري ما تيأس أستاذ توفيق يعني
Tawfiq knows
ما مسألة
that we have
إنه
trained
موجود
about
بكل العالم
30
مو بس بالوضع
lawyers,
السوري
males
يعني
and
هذا
females
النوع من
from different Arab
النشاطات
countries that can
المحترفة
benefit from the
وعدم
Syrian
مشاركة الدولة
experience,
وإلى آخره
and the
موجود
issue of universal
بكل المجتمعات يعني
jurisdiction
لكن
from Yemen,
الفرق
Sudan, Iraq, from Tunisia,
أنا
from
برأيي
Egypt.
طبعا
We
إنه
tried as
كان
much as
في
possible
قيادة
to
أوروبية أو قيادة يعني في
present
قرار
our
سياسي
experience
أوروبي
to
بدعم
the lawyers
الحراك السوري
and the
وتوجيهه
countries that can
يعني وأنا اللي
benefit from
بعرف
our
إنه كانت
experience. In reality, what
المتوسطية كانت هي تنظم
Tawfiq
الوسائط
said is not very different
للمنظمات
from the
السورية
Syrian
طبعا
situation.
نختلف
The
بس هي
documentation
كانت
of
تنظم ورشات
human rights
منظمة لقاءات مع
violations and the
السياسيين
issues
مع السياسيين
associated
بمجلس
with that
الأمن بالجمعية
is
العامة
applicable to
مع
Syria. It's
البرلمان
applicable
الأوروبي مع
to many other
الحكومات مع
countries, not
مجلس
only to Syria.
الوزراء
So
الخارجية
these different
هذا النوع يمكن ساعد
fragmented
المنظمات
activities
السورية
by
انه توصل
CSOs
هلا
and not sharing
المحاسن
the
هي
information.
بتثبت
This is a
هويات
problem
طبعا
everywhere.
اذا ما نظر
But in
موضوع
my
المحاسنه
opinion, the
الموضوع
difference is
اول شيء
that
الموضوع
we had a
الشعبي
European
موضوع
leadership,
الاخلاقي يعني
or
فضح
maybe there was a
الجرائم
political decision in
وتقييم
Europe to
المرتكبين
support
على
the
الصعيد الاخلاقي
Syrian
للعالم يعني
movement
شعبيا
revolution
فضح هذه الجرائم
and to
وتوصيفها
help
وهذا
it.
بيلعب فيه دور كبير
And
الاعلام او العمل
I
الاعلامي
know that
للمنظمات يعني المستوى
European
الثاني هو المستوى
organizations were
السياسي او
helping the Syrian
المحاسن
organizations
السياسيه
to
هو العمل
organize
لدى
workshops and meetings with politicians,
الحكومات
with
لدى
the
الجهات
diplomats and the Security
الدولية
Council and
كان
the
مجلس
General
حقوق
Assembly,
الإنسان كان مجلس
with the
الأمن كان
European
في الأمم
Parliament or the
المتحدة
European
كان
governments or with the ministers of foreign
المنظمات
affairs, and
الأخرى
this helped.
الأوروبية اللي
This
هي
helped the
تابعة
Syrian
لهون
organizations to deliver
بدها
something.
كمان
Of
يتم
course,
تقديم تقارير
accountability
دورية
is at different levels. It can happen at
لهالمنظمات
different
طبعا اليو
levels.
بي ار
And
هو
number
كان
one, at the popular level, at the
بمثابة
ethical
لتنعم
or
جهود
moral
المنظمات
level,
السورية كلها كل
to
منظمة
uncover
بتشتغل
the
على
crimes and
جزء
to
من اليو بي
pinpoint to
ار
the
تقديمها
perpetrators,
لمجلس حقوق الإنسان
um,
كان نوع
the
ناجح
public,
من
and
التعاون بين المنظمات
that was
السورية
useful.
لتقدم
And the
تقرير
second level is
مصيري
the political
لمجلس
level.
حقوق
It's
الإنسان
about the political accountability
وهذا ما بعرف
and to
إذا
work with the
باليمن
governments
المنظمات
to
اليمنية
achieve that,
ساهمت في
and to
تقديم
work with
تقارير
international entities such as the Human
كمان
Rights
بده
Council,
أكثر
the
من جهة
Security
تشتغل
Council, the
عليه مو
General
جهة واحدة
Assembly,
يعني
or other
طبعا
organizations, Europeans,
مثل ما قلت
that
الوضع
are
اليمني
interested.
معقد أكثر لأنه
And
ما
here,
زال في حكومة
periodic
باليمن
reports are
تسيطر على
vital,
جزء
and they need to be presented to these
وتحكم على بعض
organizations, of
وظائف
course.
داخل البلد
The
ومنظمة
UPR
الفضاء اليمني كمان
was
له
an
مختص
opportunity
والأهم
to
بموضوع
consolidate
المحاسبة
all the
القضائية
efforts
هو
of
إنه ما
Syrian
في ضحايا
organizations
يمنيين طلعوا
and
وصلوا
to have
للحكم
them
أو وصلوا
work on
لدول
different pieces of the
عند
UPR and
الجمعية
to present
العالمية
it collectively to the Human Rights Council. That was a very
لكن
good cooperation
في
between
مثلا
Syrian CSOs to
بألمانيا
present this shadow
وبالسويد
report to the Human Rights
السويد
Council.
بلغتها
I don't know
والنرويج
if Yemeni
في
organizations are
إمكانية
contributing
للصلاحية
to
العالمية
submitting shadow
بالغطس
reports
ولحبس
to the
المجرمين
Human Rights
حتى لو
Council
كانوا
because more than
خارج
one entity should
أوروبا
work on that,
يعني
not a
ممكن
single one.
تلاحق المجرم حتى لو
As I
كان
have
باليمن إذا
indicated,
كان في ملف
the situation in Yemen
جاهز
is more
وأدلة
complicated than
كافية
the Syrian situation because there is still a government in Yemen, although it
وضحايا
has
وشهود
partial control.
قادرين يساووا
And the
ملف
situation of the
بناء
Yemeni
على تنفيذ
judiciary,
الأوامر
it has
جرائم ضد
jurisdiction.
الإنسانية يقدروا
And
يلاحقوا
regarding the
المجرمين حتى
judicial
لو كانوا موجودين
accountability,
باليمن وهذا
well,
نجحنا فيه من
we do not have Yemeni victims or criminals who went to Europe or to other countries that have the universal jurisdiction. But in Germany and in Sweden and in Norway, it is possible that the universal jurisdiction can help in tracking criminals even if they are outside Europe. If the criminal is even in Yemen, if there is a file with sufficient evidence, if there are victims or witnesses who can establish a file based on the chain of command, the crimes against humanity, the people responsible for that can be hunted down even if they are in Yemen. And we have done that. We have presented 4 files for criminals who were still in Syria, including Bashar al-Assad, and some arrest warrants were issued in absentia in Germany and then in France against these criminals. So we can work on this because it's useful. So I think, in principle, the strongest file Yemenis can work on is the political accountability, this level. And the difference is that the judicial documentation or the documentation for court purposes is different from the documentation for ethical or political condemnation or indictment. So we need to see how we document and which entity will receive this documentation. So I think the Yemeni civil society can achieve some good results at the level of the ethical condemnation and the political condemnation, and then we can reach the judicial the judicial action. We can hunt down the criminals as we did in Germany and Norway. Some of the problems we face is that there are Yemeni victims in Europe, but the Yemeni criminals are not in Europe. This is a complication that we have. If we believe that on one day there will be judicial accountability in Yemen, there has been attempts in the past. There was an international committee responsible for monitoring things and to develop a list of perpetrators, but sadly its mandate was not renewed. While for the Syrian case, this panel, its mandate is still being renewed. For Yemen, we have a National Commission of Inquiry, and its work is almost judicial. It's quasi-judicial, so they prepare case files and they send them to the Attorney General. In Syria, I think you are one step ahead. Even if the political will is there, and even if there are people who implement, there is still a lot of structural work that has to be done in the legislations and the regulations and the alignment and the harmonization of legislations. What is happening in Syria now is quite positive because there's no more impunity, maybe. Yes, there are still issues with Syria. There are still some issues with Syria. Maybe we can hear what you have to say about the situation in Syria, because we want to learn from that. In Syria, the file on transitional justice, it's not yet called transitional justice file. It is still a file that we can call retribution justice or sometimes selective justice. And a new term was added in Syria, which is the show-off justice, justice for the purposes of showing off. So the judicial institutions in Syria are not yet ready to handle the transitional justice file, and the laws in Syria are completely unsuitable to address transitional justice. The entity that is responsible for the justice file is not the Transitional Justice Commission, it's the Ministry of Justice that is responsible for that, and this will create the retributive justice Nuremberg. It is the first transitional justice experience in the world. It was retributive justice because the victorious prosecuted the defeated, while in Germany, for example, there are still 1 million people who do not know their fathers because of the rape that happened when the Nazis fell in Berlin. So there are millions of children who were born in Germany out of rape, the rape by the coalition forces. And in Iraq, we can call it also retributive justice. And no one held the US accountable for the crimes it committed in Iraq. So as for the justice file, it is now in the hands of the Ministry of Justice. So the winning party is holding accountable the defeated party, although the winning party in Syria, they have committed crimes in Idlib or elsewhere. So they have committed crimes. They were not a state, so we can call it war crimes or crimes against humanity. So the Syrian law defines ordinary crimes, not crimes against humanity or war crimes. So there's no accountability now in Syria. And so Amjad Yusuf, for example, he killed more than 400 people, and he was prosecuted for killing more than one person. Just that. Before we discuss the legal framework, we had an issue facing us in the civil society in Yemen. We are not in a perfect world, and when we compare between what is possible and what is the ideal situation, we need to be pragmatic sometimes. So you, as a civil society, you create your own strategies, plans, and priorities. And what are your priorities? How you set your priorities in this unfair world? Well, yes, the Syrian civil society is like any other civil society in Yemen or elsewhere. It's about different organizations. We do not necessarily have one strategy, and you find different organizations focusing on different things. For example, there are Kurdish organizations focusing on the violations committed by the Arabs. And on the other side, there are Arab organizations focusing on the crimes perpetrated by the Kurds. And in Suwaida and the coast of Syria, the same is happening. So the situation in Syria is not perfect, and for us as a center, for myself, I do not have wishes. I do not have hopes. I have objectives, not hopes and wishes. I have objectives because no one will realize your wishes or hopes. You have to work on them, and you have to convert them into objectives for you. So for me, I have an objective all the time. If I told them that this regime will, I was saying that this regime will fall and I will go back to Syria. And people used to laugh at me and make fun of me when I say that. I told them I have the belief. And this regime has fallen actually when we started to see arrest warrants issued against its leaders, and the same actually happened to other dictators, Pinochet in Colombia, and the FARC. Actually, they were criminals, and then they reached a peace agreement, and they were given the Nobel Peace Prize. So when these arrest warrants were issued, this regime could not be rehabilitated. So it's about preventing the rehabilitation of the criminals and to prevent their reintegration in the international community. We can work on this as individuals and as leaders. So we have to work on this at the judicial level. In Germany or in Norway, for example, you can hunt down criminals even if they are still in Yemen. You spoke about peace and the connection between peace and accountability. So now probably you hear some say that you have to wait for peace to happen in the country, and for the sake of peace, let's forgive this one or that one. I want to hear from you and from Tawfiq as well, if he can provide inputs regarding this. Well, this is not the right approach. The countries that neglected justice for the sake of peace are countries that have failed. Until now, Colombia is unstable, and Lebanon can never be stable unless criminals are held accountable and to prevent the warlords from becoming politicians. And the same applies to Iraq. So we cannot build a country, the country cannot be built by criminals. Those who make war cannot make peace, and they cannot be part of the state, especially those who committed crimes against humanity. There are many people who committed the crime of torture. They interrogate people, that to extract information, for example. These people who torture others as a joy, as a pleasure. These cannot be rehabilitated and they cannot be reintegrated into the society. So an example is the physician Ala Musa in Frankfurt. He's a doctor. He was a doctor in a military hospital, and the detainees were sent to him, and he was killing them or torturing them. So he was analyzed or presented to a psychologist, and the doctor said that this person can never commit a crime because he has psychological disorders, and he said that this person should not be released. He should not be released actually because he cannot be rehabilitated and he cannot be reintegrated into the society, and therefore we have to prevent the rehabilitation of these people politically through negotiations or through mediations. These are criminals and they can never be part of any future peace process. This is an objective that Yemeni organizations have to aspire to achieve. I want to hear more from you about the legal framework and the prosecution of Atif Najib as an example, but I'll move to Tawfiq. Mr. Tawfiq, the peace process in Yemen is stalled and there is no accountability. No one is talking about accountability in Yemen. So, not talking about accountability in Yemen, did it lead to peace in Yemen? Did it lead to any progress towards peace? Well, it's important to understand the environment that the war creates. War creates an improper environment for individuals and for communities. And the problem is that war redefines the terms. The terms that we circulate at the academic or the popular level are different in war times. So, for example, the notion of the country and the nation is clear in normal circumstances, but this notion is different during wartime because it means the group, it means the party. For example, you can be forgiven if you betray Yemen, but you cannot be forgiven if you betray your party or your armed group. and therefore the patriotic concepts and the concepts of loyalty have changed because of the conflict. And therefore, we cannot build peace on a ruined environment. And the people who assaulted the country, they cannot build peace. Mr. Anwar mentioned the Lebanese model. Since the Taif agreement in Lebanon, they could not establish a proper state. And the same applies to us in Yemen. In Yemen, we had conflicts before in the north and in the south. And today, the conflict that we have in Yemen, this conflict is the outcome of the lack of accountability, and it's the outcome of the lack of building peace, because we did not clean the ground for peace to be established. So the concerns that we have today as organizations is that the pathway of transitional justice is being designed by politicians, and politicians will draw this pathway on the account of the victims and the national interest. Mr. Anwar talked about justice in Syria, and he's saying that the winning party in Syria is designing transitional justice today. The project that we are working on in Yemen with support from SPARC, it's a project to create a kind of societal awakening to not count on the peace that is designed by politicians and those whose hands are red. Because if we want to cross to the other side, we should not give concessions. The politicians are saying that in order to cross to the other side, we have to give concessions. But they forget that they move to the other side with all their crimes and all their violations. And these become time bombs. So you will find that the people who are managing this war in Yemen are the people who were in high offices in Yemen in the past, and they never changed their attitudes. And I think this process is very important. The final point I want to raise regarding evidence and what Mr. Anwar referred to, I think what Yemeni organizations collected in terms of evidence should not be seen negatively. Human rights organizations contributed in listing many human rights violations perpetrators on the lists of sanctions, the sanctions of the United Nations or the Department of State in the US, including travel bans and asset freezing. So, yes, maybe today we cannot prosecute them in international tribunals, but we have to support the initiatives related to documentation and evidence gathering, so the documentation is stronger, and then we can work at the international level, I believe, if we gather the proper evidence. Thank you, Mr. Tawfiq. Talking about what Yemeni civil society organizations have done, I did not mean to criticize them, and what they did is not completely for nothing. It's still useful. Yes, exactly. And you have to continue this work because there are small things to be done in order to continue this work and to break the vicious cycle and to make progress in the file of transitional justice as we did. Well, in all transitional justice experiences around the globe, politicians are the ones who chart its path. And we have seen this in Nuremberg and elsewhere, even in Rwanda. Politicians are the ones who draft the transitional justice paths, and this applied to Colombia and elsewhere. In Syria, what happened is what is unique is that we have broken the politicians' monopoly of justice, and therefore we have seen arrest warrants and claims against criminals, and they were completely removed from politics in Syria. So you, as Yemenis, you can break this vicious cycle, and we can use the universal jurisdiction at least to make indictments and to submit files and to have arrest warrants issued. And this will prevent these criminals from becoming part of any negotiations or becoming part of any peace process in the future. And this will send a message to politicians not to touch the transitional justice file and to keep away from it. This is a very important thing, and we have applied that in Syria. And I was always saying that the last nail in the coffin of the regime was the arrest warrants issued against its leaders. And these were very important steps because it was a declaration of the death of the regime. I agree with you that transitional justice as a negotiations process, so it changes hands, and we will continue to negotiate over it. And the transitional justice modalities can change over time. So time is upon us, and I want to hear from you about a model that is unprecedented, the prosecution of Atif Najib, who used to be a security official in Syria, the head of the political security branch in Daraa, and he's the nephew of Bashar al-Assad. Why this prosecution is important for us as Yemenis? It is a practical embodiment of certain things. It has its pros and cons. So the local legal framework they applied, it was the Syrian Penal Code and the Constitutional Declaration. And also, and I'm curious to hear your opinion about it, they combined, they were copying international codes without being fully harmonized with the national text. Yes, this is very sad because it was like a show off to say to the people that we are doing something. Atif Najib can only be prosecuted based on the international criminal law because he did not commit a crime himself. He gave the orders only, and he left in 2011. So after 10 years, the statute of limitations apply in Syria. There is no prosecution. So it has been 15 years. And therefore he was supposed to be prosecuted through transitional justice mechanism. So the Transitional Justice Authority or Commission should create special tribunals that apply the international criminal law, not the national laws of Syria. Special tribunals in Syria with their own prosecution, with their own police, and with their own detention centers, so we can make sure that there is a fair trial. And now, what happened in Syria so far, as I said, it's just a show. Of course, prosecuting any criminal, and Atif Najib deserves to be tried because he is a criminal against humanity, and he deserves punishment. But there's no justice for the victims. There is no justice for the victims, even if he is executed. This is not justice. This is not the right way also to tell the truth and to allow the victims to tell their stories. So justice and access to justice, these are things that should not be separated. So well, I think in this case, the ends do not justify the means. So I think the final outcome is not satisfactory to the victims and to the international community, because the international community does not trust the Syrian courts. And if there are criminals, for example, the Syrian government requests to be extradited from other countries will not extradite them because they do not trust the Syrian courts and because there is death penalty, and therefore the process was not right. And this is my criticism to this process. We want to achieve justice the right way, to guarantee that this justice is accepted by the society and by the victims, and to tell the truth, because transitional justice is about telling the truth. For example, in Atif Najib, they did not show his crimes when he tortured children. So telling the truth is the mandate of transitional justice for the victims and their family members. Regarding the Yemeni experience, as you have indicated, we have the Yemeni National Commission of Inquiry. They worked on some case files and they brought them before the Attorney General. We have this problem. The Attorney General, responsible for examining these case files, he was asking, for example, about who was the witness. So they dealt with these case files as they deal with individual crimes or ordinary crimes. So the National Commission in Yemen proposed that a special court is established. In the Yemeni context, for example, we have an authority in Yemen that is to a certain extent interacting or reacting to the civil society demands. Well, in Yemen, it's difficult to operate. And the European attention to Yemen is not like the attention they have to Syria, towards Syria. And I'm sad to conclude with this note, but yeah, I fully understand that the situation in Yemen is not important for Europe as the Syrian situation is, because there is no pressure from migrants on Europe from Yemen. And in Yemen, the countries in the region have more control over Yemen. And Europe cannot sometimes interfere in what is happening in Yemen because of the countries in the region. So I fully sympathize with the Yemenis because they are left alone. And this is something obvious to me. They are left alone and they are facing different powers alone. No one is supporting them. And the justice file is left to the regional negotiators. So they may agree on something that is contrary to the interests of the people. So here, in my opinion, the universal jurisdiction should be used to exercise pressure. Until now, the authorities in Syria, they take into consideration what is happening in Europe. So maybe some of them will come to Europe, and if there is a case filed against him, he can be detained. This could happen. So I think the Yemeni civil society can play this role. Mr. Tawfiq knows that we are ready to provide any sort of support or assistance to you to prepare the files and to present them to the judicial entities or the prosecutors in Europe. We're ready to help, but well, with the strength you have is this card as Yemeni civil society, as lawyers in Yemen, as human rights activists. You have to do this so you can have a role in drawing the policies for the future, for the for the peace deal, or for the reconciliation in the country. So you have to use this universal jurisdiction weapon, and through this you can have more impact and you can play a role and no one can neglect you. So this is, in my opinion, this is the only option in front of Yemenis. They need to benefit from this strength that they have. Before I move to Tawfiq, and I think I know the answer why CSOs in Yemen did not prepare files so far. I want to tell you that we have less than 7 minutes. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. Tawfiq, when we meet representatives of international organizations in Europe, and when I ask them why you worked on the trade of the weapons trade in Europe, but you did not work on the universal jurisdiction, they say simply to us, we cannot move the files. Yemeni organizations, they need to contact us and we will support them. So why the Yemeni civil society do not work on the universal jurisdiction? I know that there are victims in the Netherlands and Germany, and people provided testimonies to different organizations, but this file did not move. Well, there are a number of issues. We have contacted some people, and someone said to me, I thank God because I just crossed the Mediterranean and I don't care about accountability. So today, I think it is an opportunity for Yemeni civil society organizations inside and outside the country to establish a coalition for transitional justice, one coalition or one bloc based on a code of conduct, and to work on this. In my opinion, this human rights gathering or bloc can have a stronger voice at the internal and external level. And in my opinion, this is a very important and practical step. The problem today, as I said, and as I said before, there is fragmentation and there is polarization and there are gaps, and the Yemeni voices are still not heard, and the Yemeni voice does not have weight at the international level, and there is a gap between Yemeni civil society organizations and international organizations. We do not find a Yemeni organization operating from outside the country with strong links and bridges with international organizations. So we have to rearrange ourselves. We have to have a louder voice regarding transitional justice options in the future. I want to add one thing or two things. Well, as you have indicated, the Yemeni civil society organizations, they do not have specific specializations and they are fragmented. And when there are grants about gender, all of them work on gender. And when the funding is allocated for peace, all of them work on peace. So they are not specialized organizations, and we do not have experts. For example, the National Commission of Inquiry does not have an expert in international law. And this is a problem because specialization is important for things to move, for things to progress. Mohammed Wissam, you raised your hand, but you lowered it. Did you raise your hand, Wissam?
تجربة الصدق الثرية اليوم أثرت معلومات كثيرة عن طريقة ممكن العمل الذي سنقوم به في المستقبل أيضا، ووجهت أو فتحت آفاق للعمل في هذا الإطار إن شاء الله تعالى. في إشكالية مثلا عندنا مثلا في
لو تعرفي بنفسك يا أستاذة بس.
طيب، أمة السلام الحاج، رئيسة رابطة أمهات المختطفين والمخفيين قسران، شركة سام في الأعمال في مع الديتي في سبارك
I'm extremely pleased
والعدالة
to
الانتقالية
participate in this
وأيضا
meeting.
مختصين
I'd like to
بالمختطفين والمخفيين
thank all
قسرا
the
والمعتقلين
speakers.
تعسفا.
It is a great experience.
الموضوع
Today we
الذي
are
كنت
exposed to,
مثلا أود أن نأخذ
and it
خبرة
is
الإخوة
very
السوريين فيه إنه
enlightening
مثلا
regarding
عندنا في
what could we
إشكالية
do in
مثلا
the
في اليمن
future.
في
It
الجهات
is an eye-opener for us
مثلا الذي
to help us
عند
to see
الحوثيين
what
أنه
could be
ما
done.
فيش أشخاص بأسمائهم
If you
يعني
can introduce yourself, please.
واضحة أسماء
Amat
مستعارة
Salam Al
أسماء
Haj, the chairperson
مكنيين هذه
of
واحدة.
the
الشيء
Mothers of
الثاني أنهم
Abductees
داخل اليمن
Association.
ما
We
خرجوش
are
من داخل
partners
مثلا
with
اليمن
SAM,
ولا
DT
بيسافروا ولا
Institute, and
كيف
SPARC
يكون
and
أيضا
Transitional
التعامل
Justice.
مع هذه
We work specifically on the abductees
الشخصيات أيضا.
and the forcibly
يعني
disappeared
لا أطيل
persons.
على ذلك وإن شاء الله
So
نسمع
I
من
wanted
الإخوة
to
والتعقيبات
understand the
الأخرى.
Syrian
شاكرة
experience
كثير
regarding
هذه
an issue
على
that we
هذه
have in
الندوة
Yemen.
وشكرا لك يا شروق.
For
شكرا
example,
كثير لك. للأسف
on the
إنه
Houthi
قضية
side,
الإخفاء القسري
we
هي من
do
أعقد
not have
القضايا التي
people
حكم فيها خارج
whose
خارج
names are
يعني خارج
known.
الرقبة.
So they
يعني نحن
use
حتى
nicknames, and this is the problem. So we do not know their real identities. And number two,
تهمة الإخفاء
they are
القسري
inside Yemen.
لا
They
تهم
never
توجهت
leave
إلى
Yemen,
نورستان
and
أبدا.
they will not
لأنه
travel
أنت
in the
بتثبت مو
future.
فقط
So
إنه
how can we
اختفى
deal
أو
with
أخفي، بس
these
تثبت إنه
individuals,
في
these
مراجعة
criminals?
للجهة اللي اعتقلته ورفضت
And
إنها
I stop there.
تجوزه، ورفضت إنه
I
توكله
hope
محامي
I can have your
يقابل
answer.
أهله
Thank
أو
you.
غيره. وبالتالي قضية الإخفاء
Thank you
القسري
for
هي
this
قضية جدا معقدة
opportunity
جدا
and for
إنه
this
يتم
seminar.
محاكمة المجرمين خارج
Thank you.
في أوروبا
Well,
وخارج اليمن.
sadly, the
أنا
issue of
برأيي التركيز
enforced
على التعذيب،
disappearance is a very
على
complicated issue
تدبير
for
تدبير ممتلكات
prosecutions to
المجرمين.
happen.
يعني
So
ممكن
we
يكون
in Europe,
نجح لأنه هون
we
ممكن
did
يكون
not
الضحية
succeed
هو
in adding the
مكان
enforced
الجريمة اسم الضحية
disappearance
والضحية نفسه،
charge
الطريقة
to
الطبية،
the
الصور
charges
الأقمار
against
الصناعية
Anwar
وصور
Stan or others,
الدمار اللي
because you
بتحدثه
will have to
بممتلكات
prove
المدنيين.
that this
فبتصير
person has
هي
disappeared
سائلة على هالجرائم
and
أكثر
that
من
it
قضية
was
الإخفاء
taken by
القسري،
this
لأنه
entity and that
إثباتها
the
والاعتماد
entity
عليها كثير صعب.
denied his existence and that they refused to appoint a lawyer for him.
طيب أستاذ سؤال، هل
So
واجهتكم
enforced
إشكاليات
disappearance
محدودة
cases
بالنسبة
are very
للتحقيقات،
complicated and it is
خاصة
very difficult
عندما
to
مثلا مثل ما ذكرت أستاذ عبد
prosecute
السلام
the
واجهتوا
criminals
فيها
in Europe
يعني
or outside Yemen. I
بثلاث
think
أنواع
the
جديدة
focus
جدا
should be on the torture
يعمدون فيها الإخفاء
and the
هم الأسماء
destruction
حتى هم بينهم
of
وبين
properties.
الآن أولا.
I think this could be
يعني
more effective
نحن
because the
هالمسألة شو
victim
مثلا مثل داعش كان
the
نفس
victim could be
الموضوع
there and the medical records
دواعش
can
كانوا
be
بأسماء
presented
مختلفة.
and the satellite
لكن
pictures
بالنسبة
for the destruction
لجماعة
against
النظام
civilian
نحن
properties. It
اشتغلنا
can
على
be
جرائم ضد
an
الإنسانية
evidence.
يلي هي
So these
بسبب
crimes
هو
can
هذا
be
الشخص كان
proven
موجود
more than the
بهالتراكمية
enforced
فهو أسير.
disappearance
بس
crimes.
بغض النظر انه نثبت انه هو كان فلان ولا
Okay,
مو
I have
كان
a
فلان،
question.
هو
Did you face an
الاعتبار
issue
بمجرد
in
وجوده بالتراتبية
identifying the individual
بالأوامر سلسلة
responsibility?
الأوامر
As
فهو
Ahmed Salam said,
انه
the
مسؤول عن
Houthis
الجرائم،
work
انه على الأقل
under different
لأنه
nicknames
بالجرائم ضد
and they do
الإنسانية
not
مو
they
بس يكفي
conceal
انه
their
يقوم بجريمة،
identities.
لا يكفي انه
So
يقوم
how do you deal with
يعطي
that?
امر بارتكابها،
Well,
يكفي انه هو بيعرف انه ارتكبت هذه الجريمة وعنده
ISIS
القدرة انه
was the
يمنعها
same.
ويحاسب المرتكب
What
تبعها
we faced with
ومعاقب بهذا
ISIS was
الفعل،
the
فهو
same. They
يعتبر
had different
قدامه.
names,
وبالتالي
but
بتصير الامور
for
حتى لو كان ما نعرف اسم اللي قام
the people
بالجريمة، لكن وقت
from
نعرف
the
سلسلة
regime,
اوامر اي
we
حدا
have
منهم
worked on the
بيكون
crimes
بيرتكب
against
جريمة نفس
humanity,
نحن ما بنعرف اسم
and
السجان، ما في
we
معتقل
identify the
بنعرف اسم
positions of
السجان
these
والمشكل
individuals
حتى لانه القبضة
regardless of
شيء
their
والقبض شيء،
identity. Um,
لكن
their
المسؤول عن
their
الفرار
positions were
هو
sufficient
مسؤول عن تحقيق
to
معروف، اسمه معروف أو اسمه
to
معروف،
confirm
وهذا
or
بيساعد.
to prove
شكرا
that
أستاذ
they were
أنور.
responsible for
عشان
these
بس
crimes,
أستغل هذه اللحظة
because
وأكد على
crimes
أهمية أن
against
منظمات العاملات تستفيد من
humanity
خبرات الناس المختصين،
include, for
لأنه
example,
سوريا
ordering
مثل
the
هذه ما
crime.
يعلمها إلا
So
شخص
having
عالم في
this
المجال.
person in this position,
مسألة
ordering
حتى
the
أن
crime
واجب
or
الحماية
knowing about it
المسؤول
and not
واجب أن
holding
يمنع ارتكاب
accountable the one
الجريمة.
who committed it,
وسام
this is
الميكروفون معك.
this is sufficient based on the chain of command. So we do not know, for example, the prison wardens or their faces or their identities, but the one in charge of the security branch is known, his rank, his position is known, so he can be prosecuted. Thank you, Mr. Anwar. I want to highlight that civil society organizations can also benefit from the expertise of the specialists and the experts, and also the duty of protection to prevent the committing of the crime. Wissam, go ahead.
انه في مستوى تقني بحيث انه يقدم الضحايا كاعداد وارقام ومسائل تقنيه.
Thank you for this session. It's great. As we have Mr. Tawfiq, I want to say that yes, we are late, very late, but we have options that we did not exhaust so far. So we move to the next level. For example, the popular trials are important because they will create a kind of accumulation, and this will protect victims, and this will prevent criminals from continuing with their crimes. What I see is that there is a technical level. What we do in the work of the civil society in Yemen, we present victims as numbers, and without conveying to the reader the crime and its nature, and to provide comfort to the victims. And the other thing, I think the monitoring activities of human rights violations in Yemen are still pending the foreign funding. So we do not have independence. And civil society organizations, when they document crimes, they contribute to justice, so they have to understand this responsibility. And number three, we have political links of some civil society organizations that prevent them from becoming neutral or impartial. So Tawfiq said in a TV interview, for example, that the Yemeni government does not collaborate with journalists, the Yemeni journalists. I want to tell you that human rights organizations in Yemen, they also do not collaborate with journalists and with the press. We do not have a common language. So the cases you work on, we can convert them into human stories that we present to the reader and to the people. So as journalists, we can do that. As journalists, we work only on the news. We do not provide stories to the people about human rights violations, and these stories can be very impactful if we craft them. I think in the future, we have to focus on the networking between human rights organizations and the journalists who can write stories, emotional stories, and journalists who believe in this job. And great, thank you, Wissam. This is great what you said, Wissam, because the role of the media is important. As I said at the beginning, in Syria, some artists worked on that. We had art exhibitions, and the stories of the victims were told to everyone in podcasts and in theater plays as well. Another point is the popular thoughts. It's important to work on this. And it is not necessary to have a physical place for it. The Dutch, for the first time, they were broadcasting the court sessions online, live stream. So the judges were there, the accused and the defense, and it was live streamed. This is very important because we have to inform the people. This is a popular court. It can be done even online with judges who have credibility and good reputation. So these cases can be presented to them and verdicts can be made. Judges with credibility, with history. So this can provide moral support to the victims and can help in punishing the perpetrators. So we have started working on that since 2015 to have a popular court or people's court and to present cases, but the project did not proceed. It faced some challenges, but this is an idea that we worked on since 2017. And I believe activists from Afghanistan worked on that. In Iraq, they did. They established a court in Sweden, in Afghanistan as well. They had people's courts. I think Yemenis can benefit from these experiences and we're ready to help. For the sake of time, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Via, if you can be very brief because we have exceeded our time.
يعني لا بأس بها في اليمن تعمل في هذا الجانب، لكن هل آن الأوان أن تتصدر مسألة المساءلة عملية السلام والعدالة الانتقالية؟ هذا موضوع أعتقد إنه لازلنا بعيدين جدا فيه. هل آن الأوان إنه فعلا نعمل تصور بحيث إن إحنا نوازن بين السلام والعدالة؟
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you for this session, which is very important, talking about a new topic, transitional justice and peace. The question I have, is it the right time in Yemen to move from the monitoring and documentation of the violations? We have made great progress on this in Yemen. So is it the right time for us to move to accountability and to focus on accountability? And should this come before peace? I think we are still very far away from this. So we can now create the concepts. So we can balance between peace and justice, because we cannot say to the victims, you have to wait. You have to wait until the peace process in Yemen is established. So justice, access to justice and accountability has to be part of the peace process and should not be postponed until full peace is realized. This is an important question I have, and I hope there can be a concept from civil society organizations to think about justice as an integral part of the peace process and not to be postponed. I draw your attention that the Transitional Justice Forum conducted many discussions about this topic, and this topic is debatable, and we do not have time to discuss this at length now, but it's the team can coordinate for another discussion on another day. Fatima, can you be very brief in less than a minute so we can conclude?
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير. سعيدة جدا بهذا اللقاء وبهذا النقاش. العدالة الانتقالية مهمة جدا، لكن من رأيي يعني من وجهة نظري البسيطة طبعا مقارنة بالإلهامات الموجودة في هذا اللقاء، أشوف إنه موضوع التوعية بأهمية الإبلاغات عن الانتهاكات عشان لما بعد
I'm extremely glad to participate in this meeting and this discussion.
الإساءة ومما يحصل لهم الجرائم التي ترتكب بحقهم كثير، بالذات عندنا ما أدري في المجتمع اللي موجود عندنا في المحافظة. أحس لا زال التوعية بأهمية.
So good afternoon. I'm extremely glad to participate in this discussion. Transitional justice is crucial. But in my opinion, I believe that we have great experts in this meeting, and I see that raising the awareness about notifying and reporting the violations is important. So everything can be documented, and then transitional justice can be employed. There are many people who were subjected to abuse and crimes were committed against them in our society, they do not report these violations, so they do not understand the importance of reporting these crimes. So these crimes have to be reported first, especially in Hadramaut. The discussion we have today is great, and it is an eye-opener for us. So I wish you all the best. Thank you. Thank you, Fatima Tawfiq. Go ahead. Thank you, Wissam, and your comments are very valid. However, I want to draw your attention to something regarding the stories that are based on human stories. We have worked on that, and there are some special reports about stories for victims who left prison, and they were given to a journalist, and he crafted them. And this report is 240 pages. We have another report about violations against women, and it will be published soon. Regarding funding, I do agree with you that we in some organization, so far we have 90 publications. 60 of them were issued or were created with our self-efforts without any sort of funding. There are challenges. There are some activities that can only be conducted if funding is provided. A final point regarding journalists. Sometimes I send reports after they are issued to more than 120 journalists, and maybe 2 or 3 of them publish it and interact with it. So maybe we need to establish more links with the journalists, because some of the journalists they insist that we write in the email that this is important and you have to publish it. They do not read sometimes. But this is a very important point. We have to reconsider the relationship between society organizations and journalists. We need to have a stronger partnership. Thank you, Tawfiq. Mr. Anwar, do you want to add any final remarks? What I want to say is that Yemenis deserve justice and deserve to live in a country that is white for them. Yes, they suffer. They always suffered, Yemenis, since the days of Ali Abdullah Saleh and Ali Salim al-Bir, and they're infighting. So Yemenis deserve to live in peace and to have a better life for them and for the next generations. And I myself and we as a center are ready to provide any sort of support to help Yemenis achieve justice and to have the country they deserve. Thank you, Anwar. And thank you, Anwar, for these words. And we will continue to contact you. Thank you, Tawfiq, and I'd like to thank all the supporters and all the participants, and we apologize if we have not given you the opportunity to speak. Some of you who wanted to speak, please try to keep an eye on our activities and what we do, and see you next time. Goodbye.